because I'm sick of my wife spending hours on the phone wrangling with insurance. She's a friend of the family. She's going to be the one to do it. And I'm sick of her wasting part of her life wrangling with insurance companies. The other concern I have is in watching the Republicans work in Wisconsin regarding universal health care. Another way of thinking about it is simply Medicare for all. A question was asked earlier, what are some of the arguments that Democrats can make? I want Democrats to make that argument really loud and clear, cognizant of the fact that the Republicans are going to come back to people currently on Medicare and say they're going to take it away from you, you're not going to see your doctor, and all this crap. And I really want Democrats to think carefully about this issue and be ready to assure people currently on Medicare that they're not going to lose a thing. We're going to make the system better, cheaper, and more inclusive, and so people don't have to worry about Medicaid disappearing or funding for their children's health issues.
Well said.
Thank you.
That's my point exactly, that I think they've opened up the space again for us to go after this, and I think the logical conclusion that most people have looked at this, certainly every other industrialized nation in the world, including Australia that President Trump loves, have gotten to that point. I would say that that was a very good point at the end, that we need to think carefully about this, not rush into it in terms of missing an opportunity that's here to get this right. And one of the things we get as a member of Congress, people calling, there's a bill in the House right now on a single payer plan, whatever, and people writing, and a lot of times co-sponsoring the legislation or not, but I'm talking to people, the piece of legislation that's in the House right now doesn't address what we're going to do with the VA system as it sounds right now. So we need to wrap that in, Indian health care, TRICARE and all that. But I think you're exactly right. We know who they are. We saw their plan. They're caught in the weeds. They're not talking to Eric and his family. They're not talking to you and your wife. Why don't we come up with this? Because I feared that Trump might be a change agent in certain ways where he was going to do the damage he's doing now. But I also thought there might be a silver lining. I thought that he might just be on the fringe enough like that he might just co-opt single payer, put it in, say they did it, and people would vote Republican for the next 30 years. That's what I thought he was going to do. He didn't have the courage or the vision or whatever. So I agree with you. As far as the states go on this and the Wisconsin thing, I have to tell you this, my campaign team has my unofficial slogan for governor. They said it's Walz or Wisconsin. So that's my unofficial theme.
I just add to your healthcare comment. I think we have to get to universal health care. It is more complicated than the Republicans understand getting to universal health care, whether it's Medicare for all, whether it's a public option. What I don't want to see happen, though, is 80% of employees get their health care through an employer. I can tell you, we didn't use an insurance company, actually. We self-insured our employees. We used a company only to administer our plan. So I saw exactly what we paid for and how we paid for it, and we worked on preventive medicine so that employees would be healthier and costs would be lower. So I've actually managed a plan like that. What I don't want to see is a $120 million tax cut for a corporation. So keep in mind when you start talking about, let's make sure that on the other side of this, companies are still participating in the health of their employees.
Good point. I think that's what you're saying. Be smart about it, get it in, fix this, take it off the table, and watch the economy just boom, and watch people's lives get better. And this is our time. This is the time to do this.
Well, in regards to that last comment, watch our economy get better. Just about every spare penny, I'm a retired teacher, but I work out, I still continue to work. Just about every spare penny I make right now goes toward health insurance.
Exactly.
And what could I do with, what could the economy do with my...
That's the message to people. If you're a teacher, we always use Maslow's hierarchy, and we as progressives always want people to be self-actualized because it's an existential fix we're going to make to the planet. Let's start talking to them. It's going to give them more money and they're going to be richer, or whatever it might. Start talking more to the bottom of Maslow instead of the top, and people will come along with us. So, sir.
Thanks for the second question. This is about foreign policy, and I think we know coming out of the last election that a lot of people questioned Trump's temperament and the ability to handle it with the nuclear codes. We look back in history and we see the Gulf of Tonkin resolution where we were put into the Vietnam War, and we later reversed that resolution and enacted the War Powers Act, which has since been circumvented by a number of presidents. We now are living under an authorization of military force. But we have a history of Bush coming to Congress and getting approval. We have President Obama asking Congress to approval to go into Syria. And I'm worried with the erratic behavior of Trump. He could easily provoke us into a position where we can't escape, and now we're forced to unite behind him. And so what kind of things can the House do to restrain him from going into those provocative states?
Amen. I would have planted that question if I could. Last week before we left, 9 of us reintroduced a proposal, a bill in that the president must get a new AUMF, authorization for the use of military force. The idea that the president is using, I've asked for this, and this is bipartisan. My friend Walter Jones is on this. This is bipartisan. The president is using the authorization to go into from Syria to everywhere else. And we all know that that is a hellish situation that we need a national dialogue on. But the president is using the attacks on 9/11 AUMF is still the one that's being used for these other military engagements. It is absolutely ludicrous. As a member of Congress, I'm absolutely appalled that we would give our authority, which is vested in us. It's clear in the Constitution that we're the ones that are supposed to do this. The reason that it's there is, if we're going to send your sons and daughters to die, I need to stand right here and tell you why I did that. We cannot give it away. We cannot give it to a president, even though I think he surrounded himself with some pretty stable folks over at Department of Defense. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Encourage your representative, if you can get through to them, to sign on to the authorization for the use of military force to be renegotiated, redebated on the House floor, and revoted on before the president is allowed to use any military force anywhere. That's the first thing that we can do. The second thing that we can start to do is to tell people the president's budget is asking for $56 billion more for defense, at the same time that he's cutting the State Department and all of the other pieces of soft power that prevent and try to fight against famine relief in Sudan and those types of things. All of us know, and I am the ranking Democrat on the VA. I spent 24 years in the military. I can tell you what I know best about this. Our country wants us to give the best possible care to our veterans. The way we ensure our veterans get the best possible care is don't create any more of them. That is the best way. I think you're getting another one. No, he's standing. That gentleman's been standing for 2 hours. He just wants a chair, okay.
Lots of chairs up front.
Angie, nice to see you again. For those of you who don't know me, my name's David Snyder. I ran for the 6th Congressional Seat in some memory.
Yeah.
My question has to do with labor. Now, last year, the building trades, on an average, 40% voted Republican. Union membership overall, 33% voted Republican. Now, we're afraid, of course, of right to work coming into the state of Minnesota, but also ended up being a national bill as well. What are you going to do to win labor back? And also keep in mind that not everybody has the skills or the education or the capability of either for these higher technical jobs. We have to provide jobs not only for the highly skilled, but for those with less skills. So it has to be across the board. Where do you stand on making the country a minimum of $15 an hour wage so that people working at a minimum wage job can live off of that money? Not have to worry about putting a roof over their head or working 2 or 3 jobs. So my question is, how are you going to win back labor, and what are you going to do as far as skill-wise and bringing jobs for those that don't necessarily have the higher skills for these higher.
Well, I would say they're different skill set. I said the greatest day in my house would be if my son Gus comes home and decides he wants to go be a plumber. That would be a high, because I know he's going to be employed. I know it's noble work. I know he's going to get the skill set. He's actually going to be able to produce that. Your point was right. Labor overwhelmingly voted. I think we see labor as a monolithic group. I saw members up on the, labor members up on the Iron Range say, well, if we're not going to be able to do some of these economic activities, what matter? And this is where this becomes tough choices. Talking about how we do things safely, how do we combine environmental safeguards with economic activities, whether it be farming, whether it be mining and other things, where it is heavily labor intensive for the folks you're talking about. And I think what we have to stop doing is seeing that labor as monolithic and starting to get back with the gentleman, where was he at, asked about what is our policy. We had no economic message that resonated to them. So a billionaire shyster was able to give them a message and felt like he was going to do more for them to create the job, because that nobleness of work and the ability to live where you want to live and do the type of lifestyle you want to do is what was critically important to them. And again, I go back to that quote. They knew more and trusted him more than they trusted us, who stood there. So my pledge to you is, once again, we have to take this notion back of the nobleness of work and labor. That's why you should not pay more taxes for carrying lumber than you do for carrying interest, which you do right now. That's why we need to start messaging back to people of why those things matter and why a living wage, again, Maslow, encourages everyone's economy to go up. Gwen was right, and there's a reason it's quoted so much is, when we all do better, we all do better. And I think taking this message, and what I would say is, we need as progressives to understand, this is not, and the gentleman's point on Wisconsin is very well thought out. There's a professor over there that's written some things on this from Madison that's telling us about this. We need to make the case on this. This isn't labor versus business. This is about the fairness and the nobility of work, and we expect to have a fair share in that. So I can tell you this, that again, I think it's incredibly important that we make sure minimum wage, and I voted on it in the Congress, and in fact, I took a pledge in 2006 and says if we didn't get the minimum wage raised up to a living wage, I would give back my raise every year back to the Treasury, which, by the way, is 4 times more than Trump gave back in that damn ceremony he did. But you know what? As Minnesotans, now I told you it, so it doesn't count. But the point being on it is, you know that's true. The point being, you're being exactly right on this, that we should talk and we should fight and we should make sure it gets there. But those labor folks who voted for Trump are aspiring for more than $15 and that. They're aspiring for a career in there. We need to make sure, as Angie said, all of the training is there. We put an emphasis on it. Parents, teachers, schools are focusing on that. And then we go to those folks to let them know who's on their side. And so when I go into the labor halls or whatever, and we need a conversation amongst all of us on this, that who are we, and again, whether you're progressive, Republican, or whatever, what are we as a society want to get to? How do we want jobs to look like? And go to those people with some ideas that why we're different. So I ask you to think differently as you see labor. Frustrating as heck to me to know that labor in many cases voted overwhelming. Hell, 2/3 of veterans voted. And the first thing, the bill they tried to bring up was to tax the GI Bill. And we have to make them convinced we're on their side. And thanks for running too. It's good to see you.
David, I just want to add to that. Look, I think we got to go have those conversations directly with labor. I mean, I'm standing here, I had every labor endorsement from the state of Minnesota. Why did they turn and vote for Donald Trump? And I can tell you a lot of it was the populist economic messaging that Trump gave them. The idea that healthcare costs are taking up every single bit of any extra money families have, and what are we going to do about that? We've got to remind people, not just through our words, but through our actions, that we're actually working for working families in this country. And I'll tell you what, the company I work for had 2,000 assembler jobs in Minnesota. These are $15 an hour jobs right now, without changing the federal minimum wage, and the answer is yes, I would support every American making a living wage. Keep in mind, though, that labor rates vary across this country. So having a minimum wage and an appropriate wage for every region is a different conversation, and we need to make sure that if you make $15 an hour, that you can live working full-time in this region making that.
And don't forget either that a lot of those folks thought you were going to take their guns. And we need to start having a conversation about, we're perfectly fine with you exercising your Second Amendment rights, but we're not perfectly all right with you taking it into a school or wherever else it was. And I think we as a party need to have this is a family discussion we all need to have, because I'm telling you, there's nothing more gratifying. Last year we have this congressional shoot thing for charity or whatever, and I was the top gun in that, and I was riding back with 30 other Republicans. I said, how does it feel to be outshot by a liberal gun grabber? It's the either or, and this, the gentleman from Wisconsin is in tune, and trust me, he knows because he lived it. I can feel it from you. It was the idea of taking something from you, and they made that case. We need to message better that we are perfectly fine with that, but like me, and Angie will have to do this as a member of Congress, no matter where you're at on this issue, it's our responsibility, and I sat in that room with 22 parents from Sandy Hook who looked at the pictures of my son Gus, who was the exact same age as their children when they were shot dead in that school. We as a nation, no matter how strongly you support, which I do, your constitutional right to bear arms, it is absolutely irresponsible and immoral to not figure out how to stop that from happening. And figure out
Two more questions, Tim? Are we about time? What I want to do before we take one, or you can stop when you want, I'll stop. I just want to acknowledge that anytime someone runs for Congress, it's hard and it's a long, arduous journey. Tim knows that first victory was really tough. And I just want to acknowledge Paula Overby, who's here today, because today, Paula and I see each other a lot, and we're friendly with each other, and I often say, together, we are your representative.
Anybody, let's do, this is the fun part, the teacher and me, because we go too long. Let's do rapid fire. 10-second question, 10-second answers if they're possible. And we'll go fast. If it's possible. We can get a bunch in there.
I'll try. Linda Bosma, I'm from Egan. With the Affordable Care Act, we need to stop what the Republicans have done, but I'm one of those people. I went from worrying if I could afford insurance the day before the election to thinking, well, now I will never have it. I pay $20,000 a year for my policy. It is the most expensive payment I have ever had in my life. I'm nearly 60, and I don't know how I'm going to manage to hold on. I'm a self-employed woman. I don't know how I'm going to manage to hold on with these changes to get to 65 to when I can get on Medicare.
That's right.
So,
No,
whatever you can do.
What happened in Minnesota on election night, especially in the rural districts, Colin Peterson, Rick Nolan, and myself, was less about Donald Trump and more about the ACA and the people who got hit by that. That's why the message, and you were talking about the DNC wanted the message to be the ACA is working fine and don't talk about the warts. I said, I can't do that because it's failing my constituents in a lot of ways. So I hear you loud and clear. I will continue to lean into it.
We need to fix it, not get rid of it.
And that's where I come back to.
Insurance now.
I do not want them to fail. I want them to put a bill forward that would fix it. And I'm telling you this, if the AHCA had kept to those principles of keeping people covered, of potential health benefits and done all that, I'm willing to compromise if it would have made some fixes, but it did not do that. Good. That was 25 seconds, not bad.
Sorry.
Carolyn Hansen, I'm from Apple Valley. The contents of my refrigerator are worth more than my house. My son is a hemophiliac, $6,000 a dose. He could be injecting himself with gold and it would be cheaper. Something's got to happen. I mean, who's making that money? Where is that money going?
Yes.
That's all I have.
Well, this is, yes. And we have to figure it out. I mean, how do you respond to that? It's ridiculous.
$6,000 a dose,
It's
3
ridiculous.
times a week.
And Angie brought it up right. Why do we negotiate in the VA for drug prices? They're far cheaper than they are in Medicare. And at some point in time, yeah, no, I hear you. So, EpiPen and everything else, we know where they're going with that. So I'm okay with people making money. I'm not people getting rich off your son's hemophilia.
Well, and he's 21.
Yeah.
What does he do when he's 25?
Yeah, that's right.
What does he do if I lose my job?
That's right. No, we got him, sir.
Retired clergyman.
Yay.
Yay. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Anyway.
He hasn't asked his
The
question.
religious freedom question.
Yeah.
How do you differentiate between a sin and a crime?
I think maybe you asked me this over drinks one night. My answer, yeah, he did actually. I have no memory of that answer. Whatsoever. And I remember the question, it's when you don't forget.
Well, and again, we've also, the religious freedom thing, I said when we saw equality and we knew the retreating back into the religious freedom was going to be the response to spreading of equality, like all of you, deeply worried of where we end up with this, because we know it's not about religious freedom, it's about religious superiority and the implementation of...
Bless you, my son.
So we need to find, an interesting one on this is, that I think our system still has some resiliency, and this is a real conundrum. I don't know if you've seen this up in Belle Plaine. They have a Veterans Memorial, and they insisted that they were going to put a Christian monument on that, and because of they opened the doors, so now there'll be a satanic monument on that same ground. And I think people need to think about where that's at, and again, this is a teacher in us. The preparatory set is there in this country. Let's educate folks where they're at. Again, from both of us, what I said is you especially want from your elected officials, and the idea of we're a sectarian country, but you don't want us to give a sermon, but you kind of like to see us try and live one. And I think that's the one.
Okay, my name is Carolyn Jordan, and I live in Burnsville. And I'm glad you brought the religious up because I am a Christian, and that's one of the most divisive things in our party is Christianity.
Yeah.
But I think that when Republicans use Christianity, they use it as a way of fear-mongering. And when they say they're doing things the way Jesus would, they got to realize that they're not Jesus, and they can't do what he would do. And that's what my answer is to them. You're not God. You're just supposed to love. If you're going to quote God, your job is to love people, to help people, to take care of the sick, to take care of the poor, to take care of the widows, the downtrodden. And they don't want to do that. So then how are you going to tell me that I want you to live like God would have you live? Or I'm inferior because of the color of my skin, because that happened in the Bible. You know, you can't do that. You can't take it out of context. And I think that as a party, we shouldn't let that divide our party.
No, I think that's great. So when I first ran, I got the opportunity to meet Garrison Keeler, who was supporting me, and he said, Tim, you need to take back the flag and the Bible for us. I said, I'll get the flag. I'm not sure about the Bible on this one. But what I do know is it goes back to that trying to live a sermon or whatever. Nowhere in there does it say, blessed be the little child who runs out of money, and so be it, you're on your own. I think for all of us to start talking about, and certainly, again, we're not talking about instituting state religion, but I think we're all driven by our moral principles and our moral values that come from those teachings that are pretty much universal. And I think we are rightfully very careful about the establishment of religion, but I think what Garrison was getting at is we sometimes don't let it speak through to where we're at. And again, it's that Minnesota Lutheran, you don't want to tell me, but they tell us all the time about their family values. We should be proud to talk about where we're at. We're really proud about this, that our families can look wherever they want to look as long as it's principled on who loves who. So, clear the back. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Angie Craig, and I'm from Egan. I grew up in Lake Bristol.
Oh, nice.
And my husband and I have 3 kiddos. 2 are up and around the autism spectrum. And our oldest son has benefited tremendously from medical cannabis. He actually started using medical cannabis on day 1. Said it was legal in Minnesota. It's been life-changing for him and our family. I personally think since the last election, we have to force all the young people.
Inside voice.
But you know what? It's really hard is as a family when we're trying to travel or something.
Yeah.
You know
Yep.
what? Our life kind of fell apart.
Yep.
Spring break is ugly.
Yep.
And it's not okay. And it makes a difference to our son. And
Yes.
the drug that he was on before had side effects like male breast development and so on. And you know what? Guess how many side effects he has with cannabis?
Yeah.
And he's now more mainstream than ever, and again, he's got some significant.
I'm with you. Since I've been in Congress, I've been a supporter of medical marijuana. I absolutely agree. That's where federalism has a purpose, so.
I just add, I'm a huge supporter of medical marijuana, and, you know, the families like yours, Kimmy, you and I know, we had breakfast together, we sat down together, I listened to your story, you listened to mine, and it's a miracle, so congratulations.
Yeah, we'll do a couple more here. Sir, yes.
I just wanted to say real quick, since the topic of religion came up, you know, I'm an atheist, my family's an atheist family. I was a Christian for 34 years, and I agree with everything that you said. Even though we don't agree on religion, the underlying idea that we need to love each other, the ideas that Christ taught about forgiveness, like, none of that was invalidated for me when my beliefs changed. So that was just a comment I wanted to make. The second comment I wanted to make was, when you're asked the difference between sin and crime, I really appreciate that you didn't answer that, because the last thing I want is the government telling me the definition of sin.
I keep going back to Grover Norquist when he made the comments about that the Republicans weren't looking for a candidate with a brain. They just needed somebody with 2 hands and 5 fingers. And I think we got exactly that, albeit small hands. So my question is, given the president's recent, activities, if you want to call them that, Dick Durbin today said he was actually dangerous. When does the president actually cross the Mendoza line and we invoke the 25th Amendment?
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you from my perspective, and I, again, probably get accused of being a little more measured on things, because I think I feel the bar is very high. I started using the term over the last 24 hours, obstruction of justice, and that is the point. So, and I say that because the evidence and in your own words it got there. So I do think, and again, all of us want to see the president be successful, and I really do believe that we want to try and get there. There's something very American about that. But this is a different thing, and I said, being able to be bipartisan and work with people is one thing. I will not normalize hate speech. I will not normalize things that weaken our country or weaken those institutions. And I think now it's encouraging to me. And I have to tell you, I think when someone deserves praise, they need to get praise. Congressman Paulson asked for an independent commission on Russia. And that takes bravery in the political party. He should be applauded for that. So, you know how we usually end these things? My wife usually does a song at the end. I don't know. I've heard of This Little Lad of Mine. Remember that one? So yeah. Garrison Keillor always says this land is your land, and it is your land.
Hi, I just want to say one last thing before you wrap up. So my name is Dana Coulter. I live in Lakeville. I have been working on several town halls in this district to try to get Jason Lewis to hold one. And so I'm so pleased that I got to actually attend a real town hall. Does not know what he's missing. This was absolutely fabulous, and I feel so privileged to be here and hear all the concerns of all the constituents in this area. And one thing I did want to mention is that I'm part of a group called Indivisible Resistance of Egan Burnsville. And this past week, we've been sort of promoting Jason Lewis as a missing person. And we have an event on Monday night in front of his office, and we're calling it a candlelight vigil for our missing person. It's from 8 to 9:30, and his office is 28. I believe this, I have his address memorized. 2805 East Cliff Road in Burnsville. So if you're willing to come out with a flashlight or signs or whatever, we'd love to see you Monday night.
I can tell you what makes this even better, though, and it's a fabulous crowd or whatever, encourage a whole spectrum of ideas, from our libertarians to our Greens to our Republican friends and all of us in here. We're not in a little box, and we're in a world today where everybody wants to somehow have everything be filtered through their political lens. I oftentimes, when people say he's a Democratic congressman, well, first of all, I'm a husband, a somewhat decent one, I think, a father, and other things. I think all of us need to start expanding the definition of citizen, expanding the definition of community, and not everything has to come through that lens. And so these dialogues, and that's why I never understood why people don't. I get in places where, trust me, it's not quite as friendly as this. My district is a little the other way, but it, I shouldn't say not friendly. It is friendly. It's just a difference of idea that challenges my thinking too, challenges where I'm at. So I think, and this would be my suggestion to you, all of you on this, is continue to ask for this, because I think it would be an incredible experience for you and the congressman. I think it would be all of us, and again, if it's one step closer to kind of healing the rift we have in this country, that's what we should shoot for. And then if that doesn't work, just elect her, and then you can do that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on short notice. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, folks.